Conversations with Iris. Here's your host, my loving wife, Iris.
Hola, mi gente bonita. Hello, beautiful people. And hello, beautiful listeners. Welcome back to another episode of Conversations with Iris, the little podcast that could. Thank you to everyone who continues to download, listen, and just sharing this space with others and your friends, your family. I just truly appreciate all of the love. I appreciate all of you. If this is your first time tuning in, bienvenidos. I love to say that in Spanish. Welcome, bienvenidos to you. And if you're one of the loyal listeners who comes back every Friday, thank you for trusting this space. Remember, Fridays are fun days here at Conversations with Iris because we bring you that pizzazz, that sazon, that flavor to these great conversations with just incredible individuals. That's what I love about what I do, and just talking to people is one of my greatest things that I love to do. And let me tell you guys, today's conversation is going to be a good one. Today, we're going to be talking about leadership, navigating chaos in business, trusting your intuition, and what it really takes to grow companies without losing the human side of yourself, the human side of leadership. Because let's be honest, sometimes leadership isn't cute, cookie cutter. It's not neat, it's messy, it's complex. And it does require a lot of that courage, braveness, fierceness. I like that word, fierceness. I use that a lot with my girls talking on the phone. Girl, you need to be fierce to get out there and conquer the world. But let me go back here to our guest because she understands that deeply. So, who is she? Our guest today is a strategic advisor who works with woman founder CEOs and leadership teams running companies between 15 million and 50 million, helping them navigate through growth, complexity, and those moments when something big in the business has to change. Okay. We all know, we all been there. Businesses go through a lot of change, and sometimes they need to continue to thrive, right? But before stepping into and advising founders, she found more than two decades inside high pressure corporate environments, just helping lead acquisitions, bringing major tech platforms to the market, and even driving hundred of millions in revenue, which is pretty exemplar. That's amazing. And she's also worked with companies like Microsoft, Oracle, Airbnb, Electronic Arts, and Petron. And today, she helps leaders align strategy, people, and execution so that their business could thrive and just grow without breaking. It's very important. She's known for the very honest, direct approach to leadership and something she calls wild love. Ooh, I love that. Wild love, which is a fierce care combined with clear truth and accountability. So, without further ado, bienvenidos to Conversations with Iris. Serin Silva. Welcome.
Bienvenidos.
I love the way you said that. Oh my goodness. For those that are listening, Serin is actually Turkish. English is not your first language like me, Nicole. That's very exciting.
Yeah. It, it,
Oh,
I often forget that, but my parents, when they immigrated over, they didn't speak any English, and they learned English from the TV. And there was Baby Serin, so Baby
yeah.
Serin learned Turkish first.
Oh my God, Serin. That's amazing. That's amazing that you were able to do that. Let me ask you something.
Yeah.
If someone met you outside of work, okay, maybe at a coffee shop or a dinner, what is something about you that people might be surprised to learn about you that they didn't know?
Um. Well, I have a great business career that I'm very proud of, but I'm also an intuitive, um, or seer, some people say, and a
Mm.
medium.
Oh my God. A medium, like you could kind of like tell
Yeah.
people's auras. Is that what that is?
Like
Like,
can connect to people who've passed away.
oh my goodness, that is
Yeah.
amazing. Girl, you just hit one of my favorite things because I love all of that.
Yeah. So I guess
Oh,
people would not know that probably.
really? Let me ask you something and then we'll get
Sure.
into the nitty gritty. Do you
Sure.
see dead people or just you could feel the aura?
Uh, I can communicate with them. So sometimes I can see them, sometimes I can't. But I can feel their presence and then describe them and then translate what they're saying.
That is amazing. That is amazing. I've always been fascinated that people could do that. So you and I are going to have to chat about that a little bit later now. But I love that. They would have never known that about you. That's what makes
No,
you so
no.
great. And you know what, Seren? I love how you wear just so many multiple hats. I mean, you've worked in high pressure corporate environments and now advise founders, CEOs. These are like big people, have a lot of responsibility in helping them navigating those major inflection points in their business. So tell me, what was the moment in your career where you realized that this is a real gift you have to help others? Like it's really there, navigating through all that chaos and transformation. When did you realize that?
Well, I've always been a hard worker, so I think at the beginning I didn't realize what it was that made me effective. I think it takes a while for us to get to know ourselves and understand what is the special ingredient that we bring. Each of us has a gift to bring. So probably around my 30s, I started to notice that it really had to do with this sort of gift of translation and this gift of being able to see patterns. Um,
Mm,
and I really like complex challenges. And so I guess um, I started as a translator when I was a kid. My parents, it kind of comes back to the family a little bit with this story, I think, because, you know, um, they were trying to make meaning of American culture. And I was just a kid. And once I learned English and started to really command English, I had to translate a lot of situations like across cultures. And I spent
wow.
time overseas with my family a lot. My parents were really good about having us go back to the mothership. Um, and so, yeah, I have an ability to really read situations really fast, to drop into a situation and understand the different, like read the room and understand the perspectives of the different people. And then through patterning, identify what is the way forward. So I'm often brought into situations where there's some sort of transformation or change taking place, or they just have a really acute problem and they're not really sure
Mm,
how to fix it.
interesting.
Yeah.
That's very awesome. And I would definitely want to go back to when you mentioned that you basically have been doing all this your life, since you were a little girl, and
Yeah.
you mentioned how you were translating English through different cultures and
Hmm.
helping your parents navigate through that. And I,
Hmm.
honest to God, could sit here and say, I wholeheartedly agree with you and understand how that is. I mean, having to live and being raised in Puerto Rico and then come here, my parents still to this day struggle with so many words. So I still had to like
Yeah.
translate for them. Isn't that
Yeah.
amazing?
Yeah. That is so yeah, I think you can totally relate to what I'm saying. It makes sounds like even Halloween, my mom didn't understand Halloween the first time she saw it. She saw a man dressed up as a baby in the grocery store and came
Oh my
home and said to
God.
my dad, "These Americans are crazy. I just saw a man like dressed up as a baby." And I was like, "It's Halloween."
That is so funny. That is
That's why they're
too
dressed
funny.
up like that. But they didn't know what Halloween was.
Oh my God, that is so funny. So let me ask you, when you help these individuals,
Yeah.
get through these tough acquisitions or changes,
Hmm.
and this is probably a broad and maybe a weird question out there. Is it mostly the woman that deal with more of that high pressure because maybe she has to, stand tall in front of like a male dominated space? Like, or is it mostly men that are out there dealing with the frustrations, the obstacles? Like, what has your experience been like just been between
Yeah.
dealing with both different types of, genders there?
Yeah.
Curious.
I mean, I think there's a lot of variability. Like, I think it depends on the situation. It depends on the industry, right? Like, for example, the communications industry is, if you go to a marketing department inside of a communications company, you're going to have a lot of women typically. If you go into a technology company, although it's changing all the time, but those tend to be more male dominated. And as far as how the emotions are covered or how they present, again, I think it's less about gender, but it's more about the nature of the pressure and the problem that needs to be solved. Everyone handles things. I'd love to tell you that women handle it through a more nurturing, more gentle lens. That's not always the case. I'd like to say men are always tough and hard to work with, and that's not always the case. I think it comes down to the individual and how the individual can handle stress. And that's why one of the things I focus on as an advisor and as a coach is to really look at that nervous system dynamic, that stress. Because if a lot of times most of us are holding stress in stressful situations, and when we do that, we literally cut off the smarter part of our brain. There's a lot of science around this because we have a evolutionary brain, which I like to call lizard brain for short, right?
Oh,
When
I
we were
like that.
cave people and we were wandering around, the brain hadn't really evolved to where it is today. So when people get stressed and they freeze and they shut down, their deeper evolved part of their brain or their mind, all that intelligence and wisdom gets left behind. They get really in a locked kind of fight or flight, sort of argumentative, scared, sometimes scared kind of a way. So that doesn't really have that piece for me, at least in what I've seen, doesn't have a gender, but a gender component to it because that's all about our brains. But a lot of what I'm trying to do is create and insert like a sense of um, calm and well being and model that out. So I do incorporate some elements of wellness, but when I'm dealing with executives, I don't say, "Hey, we're going to do a wellness thing." I'll just say something like, "Let's just take a breath for a minute and let's like focus on, ourselves and like, or I'll give us time to when you arrive into a meeting, like let's take a minute to get settled, because I do believe that we all work really fast.
We
Also,
do. Yeah. Yeah. I definitely agree with you. And I love how you help these individuals create that sense of calmness and that well being because it is a part that I feel like, and this is coming from somebody that's been in corporate world for years. So I'm speaking from experience in healthcare. It's pretty intense and so many changes. Healthcare is forever evolving and changing.
yes,
Let's be honest, right? Let's just be
yeah,
honest. But just seeing those changes, and I think that you mentioned the stress, lizard brain, we lose that smarter part of our brain. That's so essential. And I'm glad that you help these individuals to kind of bring that back and help them kind of like, meditate through that or calm, go through this calmly with those changes. So
mhm,
that's amazing. Now, you talk about helping companies to grow without breaking the people inside of them, or what we just talked about pretty much. But they're pretty much human, and I feel like, as I mentioned today, not only healthcare is like fast and progressively changing, but in today's world, it's scaling fast and there's constant changes with other businesses out there. We're constantly seeing things that are closed or acquired or this is
right,
together or Wendy's is going to shut down all this or when Dixie's going to change. Just saying just examples like that. Walgreens is going to lay off coworkers or something. It's crazy. So what do you think from your experience that leaders are getting wrong about the growth and leadership aspect of these changes?
well, it seems to be that, and it's a good question. It seems to be there's sort of two camps. There's the one camp of people are expendable. They don't say this, but it's in the way that they handle teams. They do it in a very detached way. And the other side is, which is also a problem, is that they care too much. Coming
Mm,
out of COVID, there were a lot of things that needed to happen in order for businesses to continue to drive forward and keep their employees happy. And it was just so difficult. And so I see it on both sides. I see people being too accommodating, and then I see people being really rigid and depersonalized. And so a lot of times it is about finding what that middle way is, because I don't believe that either one of those approaches is the best for the business. I also just don't think it's good for people,
mhm,
right?
mm, mm. So, like, how do you help that individual? You mentioned how they care too much, right? And that's something that I just want to like unpack a little bit. And I feel like also you mentioned COVID. COVID changed us in a way where I feel like a lot of us are not personable with each other like we used to, right? We
Mm-hmm.
just don't talk to each other face to face. We don't want to do it anymore. We're scared to go back to the
Right.
office. I mean, what are your thoughts on that?
I think we'd never had that situation before. And honestly, we all did the best that we could. But I think the lingering effect of it is a funny relationship to work and an effect on like how teams relate to each other. And again, I see it too caring, almost to a coddling level.
Wow.
And then I see it just like brutal, like, well, everybody's expendable, you know. And it also depends on the size of the company. For a large enterprise company, let's say they've got 100,000 employees, they definitely, and I don't think this is because they're mean or anything like that. I think there's a lot of people and there's a lot of work to be done. So I think they tend to take more of an assembly line feel to it. But and it also depends on who your manager is and how
Mm.
and if your manager had enough training. Like, does your manager know how to manage? And I would say about 50%. It's a pretty high number. 50% of the time, what I've experienced is people have not been trained or given any leadership training or managed. What they do is they do a really good job at their day to day, and they keep doing a good job, and then they get promoted. But there's no training that says like, okay, so now you're responsible for the careers of these 5 people. Here's the best way to care and feed that team to keep them happy, to retain them, and to get the business moving forward. You know, I think it's the complaint I probably have had for the last 20 something years. And as a coach, that's where I come in to help, right? Is to unpack what the employee or the leader is seeing and say, okay, let's kind of sit with this and figure out what the best way is, because it is so essential to be able to understand the perspectives of other people and what they're bumping up against. And you get, everybody's different. Everybody's had
Yeah.
different backgrounds, different upbringings. You and I have had different upbringings,
Yes.
right? And been exposed to different things. And then we all come together at work and we bang into each other, for lack of a better way of putting it,
Yeah.
right? And it's like, well, that wasn't right. And I didn't like that. And so there's no one way to solve that problem. But, I would say that when we do have struggles at work and it comes from a leadership or a management perspective, sometimes it's because there just wasn't any training.
Wow. Wow. And you know what? I see that a lot. I always mention I step into conference calls with so called leaders that you kind of scratch your head a little bit and you're like, how the hell did that person become a leader? you
Yeah,
know?
yeah,
It's definitely who you know, not what you know. So Rita,
yeah.
definitely.
Sometimes it definitely is. Depends on the size of the company too. The culture of that company, and also what happens from the top down.
Yeah.
If the person at the top thinks that that's a perfectly fine way to lead and doesn't think there needs to be training, there's your problem. But what I like to say to that person is that's also where your risk is, where your legal risk is, right?
Wow. That is a very good point. I definitely want to talk about the wild love leadership. I
Yeah.
love that. I love how you came up with this concept because wild love, I just feel fiery and fierce when I say it. Wild love leadership, which I just adore. I mean, can you explain to our listeners what that means and how leaders can balance that compassion and accountability in their organization? Because we talk about, taking individuals' perspective and, does your manager know how to manage? That's very key. But how can we take those concepts and compare, like add compassion and accountability to that?
Yeah. Well, for me, wild love, when it shows up at work, and well, first of all, where that came from is I'm very passionate about wherever I'm applying my energy to, whether it's my personal life or whether it's my work. I'm all in. It's exhausting to be this way, but it is the way that I am. And I also see people at the center. Like, I really love, and this is an unpopular opinion because most people in culture be like, I hate people. No, no, no. I actually really love people. I'm energized by people. I'm an extrovert. So it kind of was born out of this passion and this great care, because I see the human at the center trying to make all these things happen inside of a business. So that's sort of the origin of where that was, and a colleague of mine who I respect a lot looked at me one day and was like, "Yep, that's wild love, what you have."
Mm,
Um, and I was like, "Oh, this was a few years ago." I was trying to get a name for how I work, um, And that's what came up.
Wow. I love that. I love how you put that concept because you got to add your own like way to kind of deal with stuff. And it's just like,
Mhm.
man, that's what I love. I love that. It's very, very, very like catching. And it just kind of, I feel like a lot of people could embody that and relate to it.
I think we need a lot of love right now.
We do. We really do. I think it's one of the biggest emotions that we're missing on a day to day. So,
Hmm. Yeah.
yeah, it's kind of crazy. I know that you had mentioned we had briefly touched earlier about the different genders, male, females, how they
Hmm.
handle. And you said something key that I want to like look back into. It doesn't matter what gender you are. It's
Hmm.
just all about how you handle that pressure, right?
Hmm.
And because a lot of our listeners are women out there, I'm not going to not say males because, you know, we still have them, but can you tell us what are the unique challenges women face just alone?
Yeah.
Curious about that. And what
Yeah.
advice would you give women right now who are stepping into leadership, feel lost?
Yeah. I'd say, the challenges that are unique to women. I mean, the first of is our biology, in that we're the ones that have the children, or able to bear children. And that does put a clock in some cases on us, as far as like our careers and like what we want to be able to achieve within a certain time frame. And having to navigate that. When do I have this baby, and how does that affect my career? How does that affect my standing in the organization? Do I lose something if I leave now and go on maternity leave? Should I have a baby at this point? And that one
Yeah.
comes up more than you would think, because women are both very passionate about their careers, and they also want to have families. Not everybody, but a good number of. I've got 4 clients right now who are pregnant. So
Wow.
this topic has been coming up. This topic has been up for a lot, coming up a lot.
Oh,
So that's one, is the biology. I think the other, which gets talked about a lot, are some of the things that I think men don't have to deal with, is just around appearance, how we're
yes.
seen. I've always been a very direct person. I was raised by a very direct and loving father, and men don't always like a woman who's direct.
No, they don't.
They
They
don't.
don't.
They'll say they're fine with it, but when you're having a debate about something, they don't. They don't always love that. They. I also think that in some rooms, in some companies, not everybody, when a woman says it versus when a man says it, there is a difference in terms of how it comes across. And the data bears this out. There is data that shows that women consistently get promoted less than men do.
Yeah.
Sometimes they're less likely to get the job. There is something just, there's an inherent bias that women are supposed to be more demure, agreeable, compassionate, supportive. And a lot of times, because we want to prove ourselves in those rooms where there's mostly men, we will take on more. We'll take on more responsibility. We'll take on more of the blame. We'll be harder on ourselves. Um, and it's tough. It's really, really tough. I've been on a lot of, in the past, on a lot of all male leadership teams. And a lot of people didn't know that I had a child at the time,
Oh, wow.
because I didn't share that. Because unfortunately, at the time, I think things have shifted a little since then, it was seen as a deficit to have a child.
Wow.
If you wanted to be a leader, and you wanted to get the promotion, and you wanted to get the raise, and you wanted to go to the important business meeting and fly to it, um, that's a deficit. Or they
Wow.
would, or they would use it as a deficit. Well, you probably can't go because you have family, and that kind of thing.
Yeah, like putting excuses as to why you can't succeed or go on that business trip.
Yeah.
I think you did the right thing. I think you did the right thing on not telling them because I'll be honest with you, the less you share sometimes the better. I
Yeah.
feel like I've learned that as the being in the corporate world for I'm talking like 27 almost plus years here,
Mhm.
the less you share, the better because that stuff could come and bite you. Be limited on who you put on your Facebook
Yeah.
or who you follow on Instagram. Be careful of those things too, you know. I think wholeheartedly, Serene, I think you did the right thing of not sharing that.
Thank you for saying that. Sometimes women are shocked when I talk about that.
Mm-mm.
They're like,
Yeah.
why? Like, that's not fair. And da, 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 da. It's like, well, a lot of things aren't fair.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm telling you, it's the best thing you could do. Just learn. I'm just learning from experience, I'll tell you. I definitely want to shift and talk about trusting intuition. You talk about that,
Yeah.
you hone on that. But I feel like it's important because it helps maintain the strategy, the rigorness, and the fierceness behind these leaders. And how can you help those individuals just trust their instincts without feeling like they're abandoning, that logic, the data?
Yeah. I think the first thing is people have to feel safe, whether they're tapping into their own inner knowing or not. They have to feel like it's a safe space. Um, and people talk about this in business a lot, and there's people eye roll. They're like, "Why do we have to be safe?" And it's like, well, first of all, everyone comes from a different background. Second
Yeah.
of all, work is very important. Three, there's a lot of pressure, and if your employee doesn't feel comfortable, um, they're never going to tell you what they're thinking, and they're never going to tell you what their gut says. And chances are, you probably spent a lot of time hiring that person and interviewing a bunch of people to find the right person, and then you put them in an environment where it's not safe for them to speak up or to really share their mind, and they can't bring that forward. As far as how the gut shows up in business specifically, I mean, one of the things I work with and teach is the three wisdoms, and that's intellect. Your mind knows a lot of things, but it doesn't know everything. And then there's the somatic, or the body layer, your physical body. Are you holding in a position of stress? Are you locked? Right? Is your breath shallow? A lot of times people don't even know that they're holding their breath. They don't even know that their body is tense. And then there's your gut knowing, or your intuitive layer, which is, I don't know why, somewhere inside of me, like, this doesn't feel like the right way to go. And what I want to say is, businesses, you are leaving money on the table by not creating an environment for employees to be able to really share with you what they think. That doesn't mean you have to do every single thing that they suggest. That's not what this is. But you may be rolling out a plan or have an idea for something that they don't feel comfortable telling you that they don't think is a good idea, and you're not getting the benefit of that. So you guys are going to go kick that project off. You're going to get about halfway there, and your employees are going to follow along, but someone before that launched knew that X thing was going to go sideways. They just didn't want to tell you that because they didn't want you to think they weren't agreeing with you, because we're more focused on agreeing with each other than actually saying, hey, this is what's best for the business and here's why. And I believe you do that with the three wisdoms, with tapping into your gut, knowing your intuition, your somatics, and your mind. I think a lot of us, and I'm guilty as charged
Yeah.
as well, like, it's the brain. The brain knows everything. If I read enough and I talk to enough people, I'll have the answer. And it's like, okay, well, right now, for the times that we're in, there aren't a lot of books that can talk about what's happening on
Mm.
a number of levels, right? From AI to
Yeah.
workforce to climate, right? So I'm very passionate about unlocking this for people, because I think it's going to help a lot.
And thank you for sharing the three wisdom concepts. I mean, and I want to repeat that for our listeners. Think about these three: intellect, think about your mind, and then the somatic layer of it. Are you holding your breath? You mentioned that. Are you holding your breath? And then you have the intuition, the intuitive part of it.
Hmm.
That's amazing. I love how you incorporate that into your coaching style for these individuals to be able to excel. Oh my goodness, this is very, very good stuff. And I could sense that passion with, with what you're doing, with that you really love what you do in helping these individuals.
I do. I love to help. I actually really love to help people, and that's how I feel good. That's how I get satisfaction in my work.
That's beautiful. Serin, I wanted to ask you just one more question here as we transition to a closure. And for the many listeners that we have today joining us, I mean, many of them are leaders, upcoming entrepreneurs, people that are just inspiring to lead. I mean, what if somebody was listening right now, trying to navigate through their own version of chaos right now, maybe in business, leadership, What's that one thing that you wish they could take away from all of this that they could start doing differently just Monday morning?
I would say focus on your breath.
Mm. Focusing on breath. That's really good. And then do you have any other suggestions like how can they move on from the stress about leading or a female out there working with men and not
hmm
being able to speak up?
I think the first thing is about, and the reason why I said breath is to go inside to take the temperature of how you are before you even go to interact with another person. Um, because people can sense how you feel, whether you ever say a word. If you're really stressed, or if you're really casual, or if you're distracted, we are sensing beings. We're not just brains on a stick. So the first job of leadership is to check with yourself on the inside and be like, how am I feeling about this X project? Or how am I feeling about this new effort? Right? I feel really fearful. Okay, how are you going to mitigate that fear? How are you going to work with it? Right? And giving
Yeah.
yourself space and the grace to understand that we don't have all the answers, and that's okay. I think we're in this very binary world of right, wrong. And sometimes when you're in, as much as things are changing right now in business, like it's less about right, wrong, and it's more about where are you, what do you think, and what direction are you focused on going in. But even in this podcast recording with you, like I check in with myself and I'm like, how do I feel? And I'm like really enjoying listening to Iris. Um, I feel
Yay.
relaxed. I can tell that my belly is like not holding. It's
Yeah.
like a warm environment. And that's at our most human level. That's where we start before we even interact with someone to lead. Before I go into a meeting with like 50 people and have to present a strategy or have to have a difficult conversation about something going on in a business, I have to check myself first. The
Yeah.
expression "check yourself before you wreck yourself." It's an old one, but it kind of goes to that same mindset of like, where am I in all of this, and am I clear about where I'm focused on and what good looks like for me? So if someone's starting a new business and they're overwhelmed, they're getting up in the morning. Let's say they're going to come on the podcast. Are they clear about why they're doing what they're doing?
Mhm.
And how does that feel to you? I don't think we go there very often. We don't look at how we feel. We're just like, my value is in how much I get done. My value is in how efficient I can be. And I think with AI coming, or here rather, I'm say coming, but I think that's going to matter more. It's going to be less about how much work can I get done, because the machine is going to do a lot of the more of the tasks.
Yeah.
And I think it's going to be about critical thinking about ideas, and you really need to get sort of your nervous system and yourself squared away before you can go to that place.
Mm. AI is really changing things, I'll tell you. It's definitely, but I feel behind all this AI stuff, it lacks that emotion, right? AI is just a machine, I feel like. I think we're still going to we still need to what is it? Make sure that we hone in on the emotional aspect of it. The because it lacks emotion at the end of the day. AI is good for data, but it's never
AI
going
is
to replace a human, you know?
exactly, exactly.
Yeah,
AI
I'm
is
glad
good
that you
for,
brought that up.
pardon.
No, I'm glad that you brought that up. I'm sorry. Mhm.
And that's kind of goes back to the three wisdoms again, which is the emotional human component that's going to work alongside the machine.
Mm, that's a very good point. I love that. Now, Serene, where can our listeners find you? Like follow your work. You have a beautiful website, by the way.
Thank you.
But where can they find you? Follow your journey.
Yeah. Serinsilva.com is one place. I'm also pretty active on LinkedIn. Um, I'm also offering for our listeners out there, a free 15-minute business read. And what that is you hop on, we talk really quick about the problem that you're having, and then I will read that for you and give you some options.
Mm.
This is a marriage of my intuitive skills and the strategy skills that I use with the Fortune 1000 the reasons that I helped a company make $500 million in a year. That's the kind of power in the strategy skills married with a deep sense of inner knowing. I can get to the heart of things really quick. So if that feels like you and you need some help, or if you need some help unpacking a situation at work, feel free to take advantage of that 15 minutes.
Thank you so much for that. I'm pretty sure a lot of individuals could definitely use some great advice of whatever they're going through. Thank you so much for sharing this space, Serene, with us. And I just really appreciate you coming on here and just telling your story. I appreciate your transparency, your honesty, your wisdom, and the work you're doing to support leaders out there navigating to some of those toughest moments in business and leadership that we constantly hear in the news or have been part of: acquisitions, changes, buyouts. It's crazy. So I want to thank you so much for sharing this space, telling your story, and putting yourself out there. Thank you so much.
Thank you. And thank you for creating such a warm environment. I really enjoyed
Oh,
our
you're so
conversation.
welcome. You are so welcome. And to my listeners, thank you again for tuning in, for downloading and sharing this podcast with someone who needs it. Feel free to do that. I know for a fact somebody needed to hear this podcast. These little 30 minutes or whatever it is, it could change somebody's life amazingly. If you enjoyed this episode, please continue to subscribe, leave a review, and share it, of course, with anybody, because that's how little this little podcast that could continues to grow. Until next time, con mucho amor, this has been Conversations with Iris. Thank you all.